One of the reasons I actually like myself is because I feel like I can be myself.
Hi, all. It's Zoe Wild here. Thanks for hanging out with me again and joining the Surviving with Zoe podcast, a conversation where amazing, inspirational survivors from all walks of life share their personal stories and expert advocates educate you, our audience, in order to break stigmas and taboos regarding mental health and trauma, kind of like free therapy and permission to always give yourself grace and compassion as we are all ultimately just surviving every day. Before we dive in, we would like to add a trigger warning below for anyone that is vulnerable to particular issues. Please pause if needed and check out our time stamps in our description if you need to skip ahead. Lastly, if you could please hit the subscribe button below and follow us on Spotify, Apple, Instagram, and TikTok. We would really appreciate it since we are a new pod and we need all the love we can get. And of course, we want to amplify our guests' voices. Today's guest on Surviving with Zoe is Kevin Palmieri, who is the CFO, founder, and co-host of Next Level University, a global top 100 self-improvement podcast with more than 2,100 episodes and over 1 million listeners in 180 countries. Kevin's story started in his mid-20s when he found himself hitting rock bottom, or what he likes to refer to finding out rock bottom had a basement. This led to Kevin finding himself debating suicide. Now, years later, Kevin helps people all over the world with a heart-driven but no BS approach, speaking about consistency, mindset, confidence, habits, and holistic self-improvement, inspiring audiences to reach the next level in life and business. Welcome to Surviving with Zoe, Kevin.
Thank you so very much for having me, Zoe. I am excited to see where our conversation takes us.
Me too. Kevin, in your 20s, you shared that you seemed to have it all, yet you were facing some very dark thoughts. Can you take us back to that moment and how you felt?
Yeah, so that moment actually started the year prior for me. I had, to your point, what everybody thinks they want. My girlfriend was a model. I had a job that paid close to 6 figures. I had my dream car. I lived in a really nice place, and I was in really good shape. I was getting ready to compete in a bodybuilding show. So health, wealth, and love, check, check, check. One day, my girlfriend came home, and I said, hey, I was thinking today that if this is what life is, I just feel like it's this gray existence with no excitement, and it's just gray on repeat. I wasn't thinking of suicide. I wasn't thinking of anything like that, but I just expressed that to her. I said, I don't know if it's depression. I don't know what it is. And she said, I think you should go to therapy. And I laughed. I said, don't need it. Don't need it. I don't need that. That's not for me. That's not for me. But I did. I very much appreciated her opinion. And she is somebody who had been to therapy. So I said, all right, let me do some research into this. And so I ended up finding a therapist in Boston. And I'll never forget driving to Boston that day, parking on this busy street, just anxious. I'm afraid they're going to judge me. I'm afraid I'm going to cry. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I walk up these spiral stairs to get to this therapist's office, and we go in and we start talking. I cried. I bawled my eyes out like, oh my goodness. Oh no. They didn't judge me though. They were amazing. So I felt so scared going, but I felt so relieved leaving. I felt so good after I did that. I only went a couple of times because it worked so well. I stopped going. That old cliche, right? It worked so well. I stopped going. So fast forward probably about 4 months, my girlfriend and I had moved. I was in even better shape because I had done my bodybuilding show and I had won my class and my job was going really well. Everything was going really well. And she sat me down and said, hey, I'm leaving. You're not the man I fell in love with. And I don't think you're the man who can support me in my goals and what I want to accomplish in life. And that was hard enough. But then she said, I was going to leave. And this, I want to preface this. This was not from like a negative toxic. She was concerned. She was telling me the truth because she was concerned. She said, I was going to leave you last month, but I was genuinely afraid if I did, you might kill yourself. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I thought this was solved. I thought I solved this. I thought this was fixed. So she left. Work got really slow. I had an eating disorder from my bodybuilding show, and I was riding the struggle bus. I fell into what I think a lot of people fall into, especially men. Many of the men I've spoken with have had this experience. I just convinced myself that if I just went and made money, that would fix all of my problems. So I did that. I went and grinded my face off. Next year, I spent 10 months living on the road. I made the most money I'd ever made. And I got to the end of that year just feeling empty, depressed, anxious. Like it didn't fix anything internally. But I found podcasting right around that time. And it essentially felt like I was living parallel lives. I was doing this job that I now hated because I know money's not the answer. And I genuinely feel like I have found a vehicle to deliver my purpose with. This podcast thing is, I love this. This is amazing. But I have to keep going to this job, and we're traveling, and I'm not sleeping, and my anxiety is getting worse, and I'm homesick every time I leave, and I'm getting more depressed and more depressed. So my rock bottom basement moment was I was traveling for work one week. I was in a hotel 6 hours away from where I lived. My alarm clock went off. I sat up. I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots. And the best way to explain it, and if you've ever felt this way, it'll resonate with you. There was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And one is saying you're stuck at this job forever. I didn't tell the full story because it's a long story, but I didn't go to college. I'm from a family that was not successful. I worked a bunch of dead-end jobs. I never thought I was going to amount to anything. I'm way further than I think at this point, right? If I did leave, what would my friends say? I make more money than any of my friends. I'm quote unquote successful. What would my family say? They're proud of me. They like to talk about how I'm quote unquote successful. And then the loudest thing, and the thing that was probably the most obvious, was, well, you really think you're going to be a podcaster? That's going to be the fallback plan?
Right. There's the self-doubt as a creative.
Doesn't seem like a very realistic option. Understandable. And it was in that moment where I thought to myself, well, if I was just to take my life, I would take all of my problems with me. And honestly, I wouldn't have to worry about any of this. Luckily, I had a friend who was a mentor at the time. I felt safe. I felt comfortable enough to reach out to him and express what I was feeling. And he gave me a lot of feedback. He gave me a lot of support. And he said, Kev, over the last couple of years, your awareness has changed a ton, but your environments have remained the same. So maybe it's time for you to change your environment. And as silly as this might sound, that was it. I needed to hear that. I made a decision that I was going to put my head down and continue working for as long as I could to save money to try to do this podcast thing. So I lasted, I think, 2 or 3 months. And then I ended up leaving my job and then starting to do this podcast thing full time in 2018. And this is always hard for me because people say, well, okay, what did you do to improve your mental health? When I left my job, my depression essentially went away. My anxiety, though, got way worse, unfortunately. But my depression essentially went away because I don't know if it was because I was so stressed out or what, right? So the professionals could probably add more value to that. But yeah, I ended up leaving my job. And then in 2018, I started doing this full time. And the rest of it was just, how do I work on myself? How do I learn? But yeah, it was. And then in retrospect, looking back, there is a history of mental health in my family. So I like to keep it high level because I don't like to get too specific, but one person in my family successfully committed suicide, and somebody else in my family was not successful in their suicide attempt, luckily. Looking back now, it's like, okay, this is a pattern. This is something that runs in the family, obviously, but I think everybody thinks, well, that's not going to happen to me until it does, unfortunately.
Hearing you just be so vulnerable about your thoughts, like one by one, as you're sitting on this bed in a hotel room. So thank you for sharing that so vulnerably, because I think, and we talked about this offline, a lot of people need to hear about how normal it is to have suicidal thoughts and experience suicide ideation. And, you have a very interesting background because, like you said, externally, you are ticking all these boxes that look good in society or in front of your community, yet internally something was wrong and you didn't know what that was yet. I think you solved it obviously by solved a little bit of it by leaving your job. And if you don't mind me asking, what type of work did you do?
It was weatherization. Most people don't know what that means. We would go into large buildings and it was our job to make them more energy efficient through working on the windows, working on the doors, attics, basements, that type of stuff.
Okay, very cool. Something that you said really stuck with me, that you reached out to a friend and they said your self awareness has changed, but your environment hasn't. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So the podcast that I started was called the Hyper Conscious Podcast. I wanted to become the most aware human possible when it comes to myself. So I fell in love with deep conversations. I fell in love with learning about myself. I want to know the good. I want to know the bad. I want to know the ugly. I want to know it all. But my environment would not have necessarily suggested to you that there was any evolution. So I worked with a lot of people that weren't super positive. I was still living a pretty unhealthy type of lifestyle. So yeah, internally I had done a lot of the work of self-awareness. Externally, I didn't do anything in my life to adjust that. And I think if I've learned anything over the last 8 years on this whole success, quote unquote, journey, when you work on yourself internally, opportunities seem to present themselves externally. They've always been there. You just weren't ready to see them yet. When you say yes to certain external opportunities, it forces you to level up internally in order to face the thing, and then rinse and repeat that forever. Right? So I changed something internally, then I had to do the next thing and make that thing external and real. And then that external change facilitated internal growth. And that's really been the cycle for the last 7 or 8 years for me.
And when like we talk about what changed internally, can you be more specific with, because obviously you're going through such a hard time and it must have been confusing for you. Like, I'm doing everything right. Like, I'm ticking all these boxes. What specifically do you think, other than like changing career, was not working for you anymore?
So I think I had the misconception that external accomplishments fix internal voids. That was the blanket state. It was, everything led to that. But my misbelief that when I was younger, we were broke. Therefore, when I'm older, money will fix me. That. When I was younger, to this day, I'm not a tall man. When I was a child, I was very little. My thought was, if you get jacked, you'll be confident. That'll fix all that. And then I kind of felt overlooked by women. So if I just date a model, how could I be unhappy with any of that? It was really the fact that for the last 20 years of my life, I convinced myself that there were 3 keys to happiness. I got the first key, that didn't open the door. I got the second key, that didn't open the door. I got the third key and said, well, the other 2 weren't it. This is it. That didn't open the door. So it was really that more than anything that was actually happening in the present. I think my expectations were so off that it just created hopelessness in me.
Honestly, I relate to this so much because I think we all have like dreams to compensate like what goes wrong in our childhoods. Like for me, in my childhood, I wanted my voice heard more. So of course I go into the broadcasting industry. And when I get there, I'm like, this is terrible. Like, I hate the hours. I don't like the topics we're talking about. And obviously I've pivoted to podcasting and talking about mental health. But what seems to happen is that these external goals that we end up achieving actually cause more problems. Like you talked about how, you were jacked and going to the gym, right? And was it bodybuilding? And yet you developed an eating disorder, which is huge to share as a male, like honestly. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you overcame that?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer. I think it was just time. But when you're doing a bodybuilding show, you essentially, I won't say starve yourself, but you're eating way less than you want and way less than you need for I did it for 12 weeks. So I ate chicken, broccoli, and rice twice a day. I had a protein shake twice a day, and then I had eggs, broccoli, and something else twice a day. I ate the same thing every day for 12 weeks, essentially. You get to the point where you're literally having dreams about just bread. Just bread. Nothing, no, but just bread. I would like a slice of bread. That would be really good. And it got to a point where the day I had my bodybuilding show, I had ordered so much food. Like I had platters of mac and cheese, I had pizzas, I had subs, I had all the snacks, 5 different kind of ice creams. I mean, no human is going to eat this in one sitting. It got to the point where I just could not stop. I just kept eating and eating and eating and eating. I mean, I couldn't button my pants. It got to the point where I was struggling to work because I was overeating so much. I think for me, it was just a realization that I've deprived myself for so long. My hormones are all messed up and I am just eating to the point where I'm getting sick. Once it crossed like the month mark, I think my hormones started to level out. So it kind of, quote unquote, for lack of better phrasing, fixed itself. The other thing too that I very rarely talk about, mostly because we never talk about this part, I was dealing with sexual dysfunction too. Like I was riding the struggle bus from the bodybuilding show because my hormones were so bad. Through time, that stuff kind of just fixed itself, but it was a very unique issue that I never thought I was going to deal with.
I just, again, find it so interesting because, when you're like an athlete and you're performing at such a high level, people think, oh, they've got it all together. Like, like, what are they doing that I can't? Like, I'm lazy or like, I'm not dedicated enough, like, to eat this way. Like, I can relate to that. When I did long distance running, like in my past, I had an exercise disorder and I didn't even know that that was a thing, but apparently it is, like running. And then my body stopped working in some ways too, because I was over compensating with exercise and not eating enough calories. So like, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of men will get something out of that. I want to talk just about men in general. About their careers, because like what I've found and I've learned from my husband as well is that a lot of men kind of tie their identity to their careers. Would you say that that's true? Because I have seen that as a common theme. And you mentioned that your depression went away when you left your job, but your anxiety stayed. So I'd love to like dive into that a little bit more and see if you have any insight on, say, if someone's listening and they're a male or a female or anyone that's in their career and it's not really working and it's kind of like life is speaking to them and that it's like, this isn't working, I'm depressed, I'm having suicidal thoughts. Like, how do you, like, what advice would you give someone like that feels stuck in their career right now?
So one, speaking to the point about men and identities, I don't know if it's an actual study. I don't know how well vetted it is, but I read something along the lines that the number one insecurity for women is body image. The number one insecurity for men is the amount of money they make and how successful they are. So I would say based on that, based on what I've felt and based on what I've noticed and studied in a lot of men, yeah, I think for a lot of men, it's you are as valuable as your bank account is.
So, Kevin, when it comes to suicidal thoughts or suicide ideation, why was it so important for you to share that struggle personally? Because you didn't have to. Like, that's such a personal subject. And obviously, it's helping a lot of people. So, why did you decide to share that?
I honestly feel like I do have to. Yeah, it's not even, I feel like I would be doing myself a disservice by not sharing it. I think that you see someone, and again, this is a blanket statement, but you see someone like me who is in really good shape and has tattoos and blah blah blah, and you assume, oh, that person doesn't have feelings. And so that's a piece of it. The second piece is I really, really, really want to help people. And in order to get to the point where I feel comfortable about talking about certain things, I had the opportunity and the pleasure and the privilege of doing that amount of work on myself to feel safe doing it. So that's the second part. And then the third part is I have gotten a lot of messages from people. I used to struggle with a porn addiction. I talked about that publicly. I had a bunch of people reach out. For me, somebody's got to take lead and somebody's got to be the one to go first. And I have a firm belief that if you resonate with someone and you relate to them and they say, oh no, I've struggled with that. And here's a list of a bunch of other people that have too. You don't feel so alone, because I didn't feel alone. And that's why I was able to reach out to somebody. So yeah, I'm hoping that my story and my message can help somebody make a different decision if, and hopefully it doesn't happen, but if and when they do get to the rock bottom basement moment.
I really like appreciated that answer, saying like I kind of feel like I have to, because like you don't really have a choice, because you're right, like there are a lot of people out there that, like you, in these low moments, these dark moments where they are going, they're hearing, all the different negative thoughts going through their brain, and they truly believe, like almost like relieved when they think of like, well, if I took my life, then that would solve everything, like you said. And I think about therapy and like how that teaches you about suicidal thoughts and suicide ideation. Like for me, also I've had suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideation. What my therapist taught me is essentially your brain like is always working and like looking for danger, looking to solve problems. And so and not to minimize suicidal thoughts at all, but my therapist explained to me that sometimes your brain goes towards suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideations almost like as like an escape. We've like looked at our surroundings, like everything is like coming down, the walls are closing in on me, like everything's wrong. So like our brain's always trying to keep us safe. So it's like, okay, well then this is the next like thing that you should do, which is terrible, but that's just how our brain works. So that really helped me, like if I ever had those thoughts again, to think of it like, oh, my brain's actually like just doing its function, and it's kind of helping me eliminate things and get to like a resolution. But are you able to tell me what you learned in therapy about suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideation? I know you mentioned that going to a therapist, it was going so well, you stopped. And I find that so funny because I've done that so many times, and the therapist always like calls you out on it too. Um, did you continue to go to therapy? No judgment if you didn't. Either way, if you went or didn't go, what did you learn about having suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideation?
So after my girlfriend left me, I messaged my therapist that day, I think. And when, I mean, but so this was the problem. I started going, and then my job got incredibly busy, and then my job required, I was on the road every week. And this was before people were doing, I'm sure there were some people, but almost nobody was doing telehealth. So this wasn't even, I didn't even know that existed. So no, I stopped going pretty shortly after my partner left, which ended up leading to me getting to the rock bottom basement. What I learned, I don't remember a ton of specifics, but what I do remember is the therapist said you have, whether you know it or not, you definitely have some stage of PTSD.
Interesting.
So my dad left when I was young. There, as I mentioned, there was a suicide and an attempted suicide when I was not young, but young enough. And I think for me, that developed PTSD. And also early in my childhood, there were people that were in and out of my life that were supposed to be pillars. I didn't understand how much that was affecting me. So I would say the cop-out answer, based on what I remember, is I learned more about me than anything else going to therapy. And I think that was super helpful. And I just think it was the air of, this is normal, Kev. Like, you're not a one in a million. Like, this is common. You're not on your own in this. You're not unique in these thoughts. So I think it was probably that more than any tactics, I would say.
I have PTSD as well, and I've seen some suicidal attempts before too. So it's interesting how in our families, like, you do need to pay attention to who has mental health issues before you, and what you've seen as a child. And like you said, it seems like therapy helped you normalize these types of thoughts and made you feel less alone. So I think that's amazing. I'm just going to switch gears a little bit. So you love holistic self-improvement. For someone that's listening that doesn't know what that is, can you explain how it's the foundation of your work and how the approach resonates with you and to teach others as well?
The best way to think of it is just think of it as three-dimensional. So health, wealth, and love. In my story, you heard that at one point I was in really good shape, quote unquote health. I was making money in an unsustainable way that was not the best for me. And I was quote unquote in love, but I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't know anything about relationships at the time. So my ultimate goal today is to be the healthiest, wealthiest, most in love version of myself, alongside of being the most fulfilled version of myself.
I feel like you say these great one-liners that make people think, because when you said health, wealth, and love, I was thinking of like a relationship love. And the fact that you said like it's about loving yourself, like, I think that's amazing. Like, because yeah, like, I feel like self-care and, liking yourself to even begin with starts first before all these things. Like, were there things that, I know you've talked about some of the things that you didn't like about yourself, but were there any specific things throughout your journey that you hated about yourself that you've come to love now?
No. I strongly dislike being short. To this day, I'm not going to say like, yeah, I love it. No, I don't love it. I've just, the best thing I can say is I have learned to coexist with my insecurities because there is no other option. I have worked really hard to adjust the insecurities that I can. So statistically speaking, I'm in better shape than a lot of people. Awesome. I have control over that. Awesome. I'm not getting any taller, though. This is it for me. This is it. This is what we got. So that is what it is. I think, just trying to live in the truth of some things are the way they are and others I can change. That's that. But that's probably the biggest one. I think for a long time I had an identity of I'm not smart. And I hated that. I hated that I was like the stupid kid in all of the groups that I was in. So I've worked really hard to shed that identity, but I would say those are probably the biggest two. But the short one, that is the one that's like my deepest insecurity.
Right. I feel like everyone has something like that you can't change. Do you think that you're smart now?
I do. Yeah, as uncomfortable as it is to say that, yes. Yeah, I feel like I've worked really hard on reading a lot of books and learning stuff and unlearning stuff, and I've had a lot of opportunity to talk about it and practice that. So yeah, I feel like I'm the smartest I've ever been, and most likely the least smart I'll ever be again at the same time.
But I also think that you were probably smart when you were younger too, because there's different levels of smart. Like, there's street smart, there's emotionally intelligent. So yeah, I think you judge yourself too quickly. Like,
most likely
you're just learning more as you get older. But
that's fair.
I love that honesty. Your podcast has grown into a global platform helping people around the world. How has hosting these conversations changed your self-esteem personally?
One of the reasons I actually like myself is because I feel like I can be myself. And I think that is a very rare thing to get to that place. So I've had so many opportunities. I looked at the numbers today. As of today, I've done 3,517 podcasts or something. every one of those is a little opportunity to dip my toe into the pool and say, let me, okay, I can be more of me. I can be more of me. I can be more of me. It has helped me become me and feel comfortable being me. That's one. Two, when I feel like I'm doing really good work in the world, I feel really good about me. That's a piece of it. And then I think the third thing is, and this is maybe not the expectation, but we set a promise to ourselves that we were going to do an episode every day and never miss. And we're going on, I think, 4 years in a row every day. So much of that is internal. I mean, I'm so proud. I've built so much self-esteem in the fact that I said I was going to do it, and now I'm doing it. So I think in many ways, the podcast saved my life in many ways. And it has also created the man that you see in front of you. We have a mentor and a friend who said, what you create creates you. And I've dedicated so much of my life to creating this platform, which has helped me become such a different version of me. So yeah, it's everything. So it is everything to me.
This is such a great conversation. I feel like our guests are going to get so much out of this. And I really relate to helping others because, you know, we live in a society where we're so vain and we're like, how can I improve myself constantly? And it is important to improve yourself. You need to grow, but it gets kind of boring working on yourself. Like it's actually, like, for me anyway, like when I'm also interviewing and learning, I get so inspired to, like, you know, talk about other subjects or go, you know, research something. And yeah, just the people that I interview inspire me. You've spoken about the importance of unlearning as much as learning. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, unlearning to me is so much of what I thought about myself was wrong. So one of the biggest things was I assumed that the way I was is the way I was going to be forever. I thought I'm not smart. I'm not the type of person that becomes successful. I'm not the type of person. That is something I had to unlearn and then learn that you are the type of person that your behaviors dictate. And that took me years and years and years. That was one. I think another thing was I had to unlearn that significance was the way to get love. I was somebody who, as I got in better and better and better shape, I got way more attention from women. And I definitely had opportunities because of that. And I had to realize that significance is great and it's helpful and there's a positive place for it. But I can use the significance I get from adding value. I can receive significance by doing that. That was a big one for me. And then I think I had to unlearn that judgment created a lack of safety. This is, I mean, I'm talking about my deepest stuff here, and I'm not really worried about it because, you know, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody reaches out and talks trash. It is what it is. But I had to, I mean, that was a really, really conscious unlearning for me. And then the learning starts when somebody does reach out and you figure out how do I try to deal with this in real time. So judgment equals lack of safety. I know it feels like that, but most of these people I'm never going to, 99.99% of these people I'm never going to meet in real life. So it's not real. So that was a big one for me too.
When you were talking about becoming more yourself, like being more authentic, like you get to be yourself. I just find that so liberating. And there's a lot of people walking around, you know, that don't love their jobs or they don't love their relationship or they want to move out of their hometown. What would you say are like some of the signs that you experience that you are not being yourself when you were in your old life?
I was nervous to talk about the things that I was passionate about because I was afraid the people around me would make fun of me for it. That was one. It was just abundantly clear. And again, this is not a judgment. I'm not making this wrong. It was abundantly clear to me that the people around me were okay with just enough is enough. And I wasn't. We are on a rock that is spinning around space. And this whole thing is freaking weird. I might as well take a shot at this. So Yeah, if you don't feel like you can be passionate about what you're passionate about, that is a suggestion that you're not as in alignment as you could be. That's a piece of it. You're more excited about the past, or you reminisce more about the past than you do about the future. That's a big one. People, places, things, ideas. That's a big one. And I'll put this caveat to it. I do not recommend anybody do what I do, where you just leave your job. I think that's very risky. I think it becomes an allocation of percentages. So if right now you hate your job and you hate where you live, one, I'm sorry. Two, we have to start by making small progress. Don't pack up your house and move across the country yet. Let's do some research. Let's make sure we vet this out. If you hate your job and you want to do your own thing, start doing your own thing on nights and weekends. Let's build up some momentum. Let's make sure that's actually the thing that you want to do. And then when you start making money doing that, then we can reallocate time accordingly. Don't make long-term decisions based on short-term emotions without inserting some level of logic. I think that's a big piece.
Because when you're mentally unstable, like you do make a lot of impulsive decisions. I know I have, like, hello, I'm in a different country. No, that was a good decision. But also, like, I feel like what I give advice to my family and friends, if they ask, if they're unhappy, is like create an exit strategy. Like, just like you said, like a plan. Like, you don't have to live the way that you're living forever, but you do need a plan that's safe for you and that doesn't cause you more pain to move on towards.
Well, I think it's opposing ideas. It's number one, strong work for having such a high level of self-awareness where you're able to recognize that and then start thinking about it. And we also have to be responsible. And it's a juggling act of, some people don't have any of that self-awareness. And some people are way, way, way responsible where they never take a risk to put themselves first. The idea is to try to move in the middle of those two things, where you are thinking of yourself and making sure your future is brighter. You're not taking any drastic risks. And you also understand the potential downside of the direction you're moving in.
Definitely. I think, like, and it just all sounds like self-awareness and, kind of going over every single worst case scenario, because you've got to look out for your future self as well. What are some of the most powerful lessons that you've learned on your journey that helped you grow?
The misconception that wherever you are, you need to take massive action right now. I think that's just dumb. I don't think it's realistic for most people. I think the people that tell you to do stuff like that are the people that have 10 out of 10 self-belief, and they don't know what it's like not to believe in themselves. So wherever you are, I don't think about where you're trying to get to. Think about whatever the first step is. That has helped me as somebody who I might come across as somebody who has a really a high level of self-belief. I've done this a lot, and this is like, I'm very comfortable here, but I have worked so hard on just having the ability to believe in myself. And everything I've done has just been these very small incremental steps over years and years and years.
Looking ahead 5 to 10 years from now, I like to live in the present moment, but I also like to look ahead. You have this amazing podcast. There's a great ability to be vulnerable and help people. What is next for Kevin in 5 to 10 years? Where would you like to see yourself?
This one's always really hard for me, because the same things we're doing, the exact same things we're doing, just better. I feel so privileged to have the level of clear. I mean, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. There's nothing else. This is what I'm going to do. And if I'm not better in 5 or 10 years, I am doing something very wrong. So that it's doubling down on what's working, getting rid of the stuff that's not working, and continuing to dedicate myself to getting better at this so I can impact more people. That on repeat forever. That is the goal.
For me anyway, I have so many goals, but sometimes it's a nice goal to just say, like, creating more improvements and becoming an expert in my own field to do my job better and help people. So, Kevin, looking back on your mental health journey, you've overcome so many struggles. Um, if you had to give your 20-something-year-old person advice today just to get them through the day, what would that be?
Probably it's not your fault. It's not your fault. So much of why you feel the way you feel today is based on years of the past that you just haven't uncovered yet. That, and then pick up this book and read this book. And I'm telling you, after you read this book, almost any book, as long as it's a valuable one, you will look at yourself, other people, and the world differently. And it's not going to change everything, but it'll change everything at the same time. It's going to change almost nothing immediately, but it'll change everything eventually. I just needed somebody to tell me that there is a point to learning. I thought it was dumb. I thought books were stupid. I didn't get it. I didn't understand that. You have worked so hard on looking successful. It's time to go inward and work on knowing yourself, and then see what happens after that.
Very cool. I feel like our listeners who may be just surviving day to day right now might also be blaming themselves for feeling depressed or down. So I think that that will reach a lot of people to just start there. Like, it's not your fault. Like, we're all given particular lives with families and environments that we can't control. So give yourself compassion and grace, and also educate yourself. I love that advice. Thank you so much for joining me today. Are you able to tell our guests where they can find you or any of your resources?
Yeah, so the podcast is Next Level University. We're on all the podcast platforms. We're on YouTube, all of that stuff. Our website, nextleveluniverse.com, has all of our stuff. We have a free Facebook group. We have a free book club. We do free monthly master classes. We give a lot of stuff away because, again, we want to add value. So check out the website. If anything is of interest of you, there is a place for you at NLU.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kevin.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.